Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about Phantom Thread. Phantom Thread is an interesting Paul Thomas Anderson film in that it starts in such a classy, slow, methodical, what you're used to thinking of a period kind of European film. At first, I thought, well, this is interesting, but it's not maybe what I love about Paul Thomas Anderson, but that almost plays into the very nature of the character that Daniel Day-Lewis is playing, and who one of the characters that this film is about, Reynolds Woodcock and his sister Gisriel, and the House of Woodcock, which is a distinctive style of couture dresses, and how he always has these muses. He always has this muse who he has around, he puts gowns on them, he makes love to them, then eventually he gets rid of them, or has Gisriel get rid of them, until he comes across Alma in a restaurant and falls in love with her, and she suddenly becomes his muse after like a first dinner date. He, right after that awkward dinner date, and real awkward, not in the movie TV kind of awkward that's painful to watch way, in the realness of real life kind of awkward way, takes her and starts fitting her for a dress, and kind of seems to be going through the motions like he's used to dating this way, he's used to handling women this way, and then eventually figures out as it goes that she will play with him, that she will passive aggressively fight with him, that she has more of a voice and an opinion than presumably the other women he's been with, or you don't really know, you just get a glimpse of another muse before, but she's a little more combative with him and more strong-willed than he's certainly used to. And seeing their relationship, you see him as this kind of workaholic fashion designer, how his own little weird quirks and his idiosyncratic kind of lifestyle sort of taken over because he can get away with it, and Alma is constantly fighting that in a lot of ways and kind of questioning that and making him actually think about that rather than getting into the rhythm, the predictable rhythm that he's always used to. Paul Thomas Anderson plays within that predictable rhythm because it almost lulls you into what it is going to be, because it almost feels like when they begin the relationship, this is something he's done before, and she will be as disposable as all those women are, and I think she thinks that, but as the film goes, you get this kind of passive aggressive kind of romantic comedy, which is like super weird but super hilarious. I mean, this film is very classy, very beautiful, very kind of grown up, but it also is very funny. I laughed quite a bit. It's probably one of the funnier relationship movies I've seen in a while. But it also kind of gets to, I think, one of the things about romance, and when you're older and you see people fall in love, that every relationship works differently. Seeing that kind of blossom throughout this film is so interesting, because I don't think he's trying to say that Daniel Day-Lewis's character of Reynolds Woodcock should get away with this behavior, and it's sort of interesting having Daniel Day-Lewis play that, particularly as his last role, kind of questioning the idea of having this demanding artistic personality and having everyone kind of bend to the will of that artistic personality. Interesting how Paul Thomas Anderson does it, because I guess this would be sort of comparable to Darren Aronofsky's Mother, but I think the major difference between this and Mother is the Phantom Thread, and what Paul Thomas Anderson does is he is questioning it while also understanding Reynolds Woodcock comes from and understands his routine, but also understands poking holes in it and has fun with that. And also, I think Mother is an interesting film to think about and watch once. Phantom Thread is a lot deeper of a movie than that and talks about grander issues than just whatever Mother was. That's one of the things Phantom Thread is so wonderful at, is that it kind of brings up the whole, buzzword of toxic masculinity and a toxic personality, but it also shows how that sort of works within their relationship. It's sort of wonderful, it's sort of twisted, it's sort of beautiful, and I didn't really feel like I completely fell in love with it until the end. Like, when I saw the sum of all of the parts together, I looked at Phantom Thread and I was like, wow, that was amazing. And from a guy who made one of my favorite romantic films of this millennium, Punch Drunk Love, this is probably a worthy sort of follow-up to that, even though it's not, there's like a bunch of movies between this one and that one. In terms of a romance, in terms of a different kind of odd little romance, I think this brings up things that, you'd think after seeing Darren Aronofsky's film Mother, how it would be interesting to see what his spouse thought of that. But in this, it's like, I think that, but I also think he seems to be very accepting and understanding, and he understands he might be a difficult person, but also understands how to maybe get that to work within his relationship, and how the sacrifices both people should make, and how abusive that kind of behavior can probably be. I don't know his relationship at all, And the whole Daniel Day-Lewis thing is just some small little tidbits I know about Daniel Day-Lewis, and, you know, obviously he's a extreme method actor and stuff, and I think there's probably more to read into with Daniel Day-Lewis, but again, it's like sort of our limited knowledge of him as a person, but, you know, of course we're going to read into that anyway. It's certainly sort of there. It kind of gets into the fact that these people have these routines that, you know, you can get away with this, but also that she will still fight him, that she will still combat him, that she will still question and call him on his shit, while also kind of feeding into it as well. I don't think it's saying what he is doing is right, but I think it is saying that Alma and his sister Sarah will put him in his place if he comes too far out of it, but will also kind of put up with him being this way, but also sort of love him for it in a strange way, which is kind of a lot more of a complex issue. I don't think it's necessarily saying that this is, you know, a way to live or something like that. It's kind of just showing that this is the way that this man does live, and how Alma in particular lives within that, and how their romance together is kind of infected by that. What Paul Thomas Anderson does here, you know, he's been a director for a while now, and I think what's interesting about sort of newer auteurism is you have people like Spielberg, Hitchcock, or David Fincher who will direct films in the style of themselves, like they know how to make a movie in their unique style that is bankable, or Chris Nolan does it also. I think what Paul Thomas Anderson does here, and what we've seen Guillermo del Toro do in previous films, not so much in Shape of Water, but not critiquing the quality of the film, is they will take on a different kind of film and kind of play within it. And Phantom Thread is the first Paul Thomas Anderson film not made in America, a very English film. It feels very gothic in what it's doing. It sort of reminds me, in terms of not necessarily execution, but the idea of what Del Toro did with Crimson Peak, where it's like Del Toro doing a kind of gothic, kind of romance drama thing, and that's the new auteurism, is going like, well, maybe I want to sort of play in this genre and see where that goes. It sort of reminds me of what old classic Hollywood studio directors used to do, actually. They used to do things like that because they could just take a week and do that and then return to the normal thing that they're most known for. But nowadays it seems like people, since they're not making as many movies as they were in classic Hollywood, they will spend the time that they work on a different movie to work on something completely different. And I think what Paul Thomas Anderson does here, it has this dreamy quality, it has this otherworldly quality. This was supposedly shot by himself, although no one's credited, so it could be shot by anyone, frankly. But although he usually works with Robert Elswit, and very excellently so, and he's always had really well shot, beautiful movies, this has a different feel of it. Sometimes it feels a little rawer, sometimes it feels very precise. It has a different quality to it. I think, you know, if any director was going to shoot his own movie, I think he gave it sort of a uniquely different kind of vision. You feel kind of crammed into that house, but you also see the beauty of it. You feel kind of the rawness sometimes of certain scenes, but you also see the elegance of other scenes. It feels very purposefully fancy and classy, but also understanding kind of how that world has its different complications within the cinematography. And certain times it feels almost like I'm watching something in Technicolor, the low lighting and so forth that was more in style years ago. It feels like someone, like in this film, Reynolds Woodcock kind of talks about the idea that, you know, it doesn't matter if something's chic, you know, this is the kind of beautiful thing that they want to do. And it feels like Paul Thomas Anderson kind of wanted to make his own kind of weird, different kind of riff of a movie, and didn't really care what was kind of the modern kind of vein or anything like that. There's kind of an interesting different quality in Phantom Thread in that regard, certainly, and especially how it's shot, because it feels very much purposefully, masterfully made, like one of the dresses that Reynolds Woodcock would make. It feels so just like a very beautifully made kind of piece of art, and one that you'll just marvel at. And it seemed like he wanted to make something that was a beautiful romance that also felt like a real master auteur kind of statement on romance in a lot of ways, but not in a way that kind of shows all the complications within that. And I love the score by Johnny Greenwood, which actually didn't entirely sound like Johnny Greenwood to me, to the point where at the end of when the credits came out, I was like, Johnny Greenwood? Wow. It's like a beautiful like piano score. It doesn't feel as haunting, but in some ways does. I think Daniel Day-Lewis is very good in this film. He has this kind of quiet voice in this, and it's one of the few times I think he's used his natural voice. He does this thing with his quiet voice, and that's always the thing, like very basic acting things or acting class things that I know is that people always talk about how actors can talk very quietly and everyone will listen because everyone's so enraptured by their performance. It's almost like he does it the whole time in a way to elicit kind of your attention, but almost show that this man has so much power you will have to listen to him. He doesn't need to speak up because you're going to shut the fuck up and listen to him, which is, I think, pretty smart of a choice. Also what Meryl Streep did in Devil Wears Prada. I do feel like one of the biggest problems with this movie is that it's Daniel Day-Lewis's last performance, and he announced it before, and I think that was sort of a mistake because it sort of hurt this movie where people go, this is his final performance. And sure, maybe it actually is, I don't know if that's true or anything, but because of that, I think people will often look at this and critique it and go, oh, this is the last thing, this great beautiful performance. And I think it kind of ruins it by like overrating it, overstating it, and all that crap. But it really is magnificent. Oftentimes when you think of Daniel Day-Lewis, you think of him almost like he is a great actor, but you don't necessarily think of all the times of the people he plays against. And I think one of the things I like about when he works with Paul Thomas Anderson is how he plays against Paul Dano in There Will Be Blood. All those scenes are fucking amazing, but still does this kind of like amazing, almost feeling like kind of like this method actor, man of as an island sort of thing. But in this, he plays off of Leslie Manville, he plays off of Vicky Krieps in this, and it feels like so much more of a collaborative performance than I've seen from him in a while. Now obviously any actor is being collaborative to a certain regard, but it feels like almost like he's playing off of them in such a personal, distinct way. It feels like something, a sense of acting you haven't really seen from him. Also, I think Paul Thomas Anderson gets into the comedy that Daniel Day-Lewis clearly has. I wish he had done a comedy in his filmography. If he comes back and does a comedy, that would be great. I think he's very, very funny in this. Vicky Krieps, for someone who's kind of sort of come out of nowhere, I don't really know her. She looked a little familiar. I'm not exactly sure how well I remembered her. The fact that she can go against Daniel Day-Lewis in such a way is really much a calling card for her as an actress, and she does so well going back and forth with him, and she does it in sort of an awkward and a naturally awkward way that is just spellbindingly human in ways that very few actors could ever get that sense of humanity, where she will fight, she will be strong-willed, but she will be quiet as well. But I think she is awkward in a way that feels like a naturalness that I don't think anyone can really get to that degree. And Leslie Manville is like so good in this film. So many of her lines, just the way she walks with such purpose and such determination, and it's like she has made a business, her character has made a business serial out of the House of Woodcock and her brother's attitude, and she puts up with it. But she does it in such a masterful way where you know she's sick of his shit, but also puts up with it. Leslie Manville does that so excellently well. I really like this film. I really like what it says about relationships with the creative person, but also kind of the idea that relationships are a complicated, weird ass fucking thing, and everyone has their own different odd ways that they work, and romances aren't this sort of thing that, you know, is this kind of perfect match sort of scenario or something like that. They just kind of work out in their own kind of strange little ways, and Phantom Thread definitely is that. The passive aggressive comedy nature to it, the idea that I've heard through various reviews that this reminds people of Wuthering Heights and it reminds people of Rebecca, and I see that in it, but it's almost like a passive-aggressive version of one of those things. It does feel like kind of an interesting little gothic drama of marriage and getting used to customs of someone within their house and being kind of absorbed within it, but also being very funny. But you almost want to go, what are you guys, like a married couple or something? Because like it's that kind of humor, but it's done excellently well. I think this shows a maturity for Paul Thomas Anderson, which I don't think he was immature before, but it shows someone who loves world cinema and loves building things, because this film feels very cautious at the beginning, cautiously letting you in, and then when the ice is broken, it kind of like can't go back to the way it was originally, and you kind of realized how purposefully he exactly smashed it. It's a really smart kind of adult sort of film, but you realize halfway through how much fun Paul Thomas Anderson is having playing with that, and I don't see a lot of adult films that have like this kind of a thing that have fun. It's always like, oh, we're trying to do purposeful, smart things about relationships and the inner workings and societal bullshit and blah blah blah. Paul Thomas Anderson certainly knows how all that works, and that's in there too. But I think he also understands how to have fun with all those things. And not a lot of directors can do that with the same sense of maturity, but also make you laugh and also have passive-aggressive jokes. I haven't seen a film as passive-aggressive as in this, maybe ever. It is just amazingly so, and I love it for that. This is a kind of like such an interesting, elegant kind of romance, which also isn't afraid to have a little fun, but also stay very elegant and classy at the same time. So only like a true master of screenwriting and storytelling that Paul Thomas Anderson is to have as much fun with this. This is almost like I don't give a fuck kind of movie. This is the kind of movie I wanted to make. Not that that's ever really held him back, but this is such sort of a crazy left turn. It feels more of a fuck you than the other ones were that were probably fuck yous in another regard. His filmography is becoming more and more erratic, and it's becoming more and more lovely because of that. I don't know if you could really watch this next to Inherent Vice. That would probably be weird, but I sort of love it as its own thing, and for Daniel Day-Lewis and Paul Thomas Anderson to get back together for something like this is absolutely wonderful. The Phantom Thread is probably one of the better romance films I've seen in a long time, but it's a better romance film because it understands all the fucked up, strange, and mature things that you have to deal with, contemplate, and realize while going throughout a relationship. And it also shows you really the fun in dealing with all of that and how much you love all those strange things when you go throughout it. So if you've seen Phantom Thread and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.